Ewa Marchewka, and she will be presenting automatically or manually, all the bad things that can happen when a test team starts to automate. Ewa Marchewka is currently working as a second line manager of 5G test team at Nokia. After getting a university degree in telecommunication at AGH University of Science and Technology in Poland, she started her journey in the world of testing. During 15 years of her working life, she gained experience as a tester, test manager, test architect, project manager, and release delivery manager. She really enjoys speaking at conferences. You could have seen her at TestDive, TestCon, and Hush Stuff. Her hobby is psychology of testing. Please welcome Ewa.
Hello, everyone. It's really great to have you all here at this TestDive conference. So, automated or manual? What can go wrong when a test team starts their journey into the world of automation? Let's find out. As you have just heard a minute ago, my name is Ewa Marchewka, and since I've been so flawlessly introduced, I will just skip this slide and get right to the point. When I started preparing those slides for the TestDive conference, I decided to split them into two parts. So the first one, common pitfalls. In this part, I would like to tell you a few things that can go wrong when your team starts automating. And the second part, how to do it right. In this part, I would like to present you, based on a real life example, how to avoid some of those um, automation traps. So let's begin. What can go wrong? When you start your adventure with automation, and usually if you are a manager or a high level manager, you very often think, let's automate everything. Let's just go for it. We'll do all the scripts, we'll run them, we'll save engineers' times, we'll no longer have to do anything manually. It will be great. It will be awesome journey. Everyone will be happy. But isn't really a good idea? Let me pause here for a moment and tell you a story about one of the IT companies that decided to create their own social media platform. So social media platform was supposed to serve engineers so that they can exchange their ideas, they can share what they've achieved, they can, you know, do more or less the same stuff that the Facebook does, just inside the IT company. When the management decided this is a good idea, they forgot about one very important thing. They forgot that they are working in an IT company, and IT company consists of a lot very smart engineers. So one of the engineers thought it would be an awesome idea if he created a script that would look at all comments and all posts that appear on this internal social media. I'm sorry, I'm hearing a background noise, and honestly, it's disturbing. So whoever is not muted, if you could mute yourself, or I don't know. Thanks. Um, so getting to the point. Automating posts on social media. So this engineer decided it's a great idea to create a script that would go into the social media platform, search for the new appearing posts, and post underneath something like "Good job, way to go, great achievement." So it worked perfectly until one day, someone posted an announcement about one of the well-known employees passing away. When there was a "good job" comment under this post. Um, well, the management found out that there is something wrong, and they discussed with this engineer that this is not a very good idea to do scripts like that, and they worked a little bit more on the security of the social media platform, not to repeat that kind of stuff again. So based on this very simple example, you know now that it makes no sense to automate everything. But what exactly? What we should not automate? What stuff automated makes no sense? So first, pretty simple, user experience. You cannot automate a script that a test case that is checking if the web page looks nice, if the color fits, if the interface is intuitive. There's no way to automate that. So anything that requires that kind of a user intervention is out of the question. Exploratory. Uh, exploratory tests by default, by design, is a test that you execute in a way that you just sit in the front of the product and try to break it in a very creative way, right? So automating exploratory tests before executing it makes no sense. Obviously, if the scenario that you used in your exploratory test finds a bug, it makes sense to automate it afterwards, but not upfront. Test with unpredictable outcome. The whole purpose of having test cases automated is to have them run without or with minimal manual intervention. Tests with unpredictable outcome require checking if the result was indeed good. You cannot by the just running script check if it is passed or failed. Do it now tests. So obviously, if a customer is waiting for some issue reproduction, or if you need to execute something really fast to check if it is working, don't bother automating it. You will end up probably finding out some bugs in scripts or some library missing, and it will take much, much longer than just running it manually. And last but not least, tests that have low ROI. And let me elaborate a little bit on this aspect. This is important when you start your journey in the world of automation. So what is ROI? I hope that some of you, or maybe all of you, know this term already. But to explain it in a very simple words, ROI is return of investment, meaning what do I need to do to make my automated test worth being automated? What are the conditions under which my investment into writing a script will return? The equation that would allow you to calculate ROI is pretty simple, and I'm just showing it right now on the screen. If you take your gains, you subtract investment and divide it all by investment, you'll get your return of investment number. From this equation that you see on the screen, it looks really, really simple. However, the devil is, as always, in the details. So what is our gain? What do you need to remember when you calculate your ROI? If you forget about it, you might fail in your automation journey. So the gain. First, our gain depends on the number of runs. If you plan to run your test case very often, like if you plan to add it into regression and you will repeat it many, many times, or if you know that the software is buggy and that kind of test will find everything every time you run it, then obviously this is a test worth automating. Another aspect of gain is longevity of a single test. If the test lasts 8 hours, it makes sense to automate it because you will not have an engineer sitting in the front of whatever there is, in the front of test interface and trying to run it. It will be just run automatically and engineer can do something else in the meantime. So obviously number of runs and longevity of a single test. What is our investment in this aspect? So the first, obviously, this is pretty simple, and this is obvious. Scripts creation. You need to write the scripts, but other than that, you need to build, if you don't have it, or update your automation framework. This is also your cost and investment. you need to train the testers. If your testers don't know how to automate, you need to teach them. This is also an investment that you need to make before you start automating your tests. And one thing that a lot of people forget about maintenance, it's not like you can write a test and keep it in this way forever without any intervention at all. You need to maintain the test itself. There's always some change in the library on Python upgrade that you need to take into account. So that's an investment. And then there's a tricky stuff. That's the tricky stuff that people very often forget to calculate when they are trying to get what is the return on investment on their automated tests. So the first, there is a coverage improvement. So this is on the gain side. So coverage improvement, what does it mean? If you automate a test, you can run it overnight. So if your test equipment costs a lot and you have a small amount of it, it increases the usage of this test line. So that's definitely gain because you don't need to duplicate your test environment to do the same amount of tests. On the cost side, there is an infrastructure cost. Sometimes, in order to be able to run test cases automatically, you need to make some investments into your test lines or test equipment. This is also something that you need to take into account when calculating your ROI. And the last thing, peeling the onion. What does it mean, peeling the onion? Always, in every type of activity, there will be something that you didn't take into account at the beginning. When it comes to automation, it might be, hey, I never thought that my test line is so unstable. I need to stabilize it before I run automated tests. Oh, I didn't know that I cannot run this on this. I need to take into account and rewrite the script. So that part is a very tricky. And from my experience, it's good to assume some part of the cost for that kind of unexpected stuff. I call it peeling the onion. I could talk about return on investment and some super aspects of it for a very long time. But since the time here is limited, I'll go to the summary. So basically, if you don't need a very detailed return of investment calculations, or you just want to make a decision, go for it or don't go for it, there are three key rules that you should follow. I call it the 3V rule. So automate tests that have high volume, that meaning you run them very often, that have low variance, so they don't require much maintenance because you don't need to change them often, and the value, the tests that are costly in terms of equipment or in terms of engineers' time. All right, so I told you about what can go wrong when you plan your automation and how do you need to calculate your return of investment before you decide what to automate. The next trap, if I can call it like this, is test environment. So what's a test environment? Obviously, this is everything you need to perform your tests. Why is it a trap? So test environment can be very simple. If you are testing an app on the mobile, you just need a mobile. It doesn't cost much. If you are testing an application that you open in your internet browser, that's also pretty simple. You just need internet browser and something that you open it in, right? But if you take into account, for example, let's say 5G base station, it becomes much more complicated. You have different hardware variants that you test your software on. You have third-party equipment, a lot of mobile phones that are very different. And you have the core network that you also need to take into account. So it becomes big. And then if you have many customers, and I mean many, like 100 or even more, then you need multiple complicated test environment. And it all costs money. So when taking into account your automation and when planning it, you need to understand, do I need more test equipment? How do I make it stable enough so that my scripts will run? Maybe in some cases, it's better to leave this test manual because in such a case, I don't need to duplicate test environments. And maybe I should automate it because this will increase the usage of the test environment that I already have, and I can use it 24/7 instead just 8 hours for 8 hours. Next aspect that you need to take into account when you are starting your journey into the world of automation is unification and, in some cases, or framework selection. What do I mean by that? Let's be honest here. There's never a case when you have everything manual. There's never a case when test team has really nothing and just does everything by hand. There's always something. Someone did a script in Perl to, I don't know, run some scenario a couple of times, right? Someone used some framework that's open source for this. You know, you cannot hide it. We're engineers. We're always trying ways to find the ways to make life easier for us. So there's always something. There's always something like in this on the left hand side. There's many somethings, but you don't want that. You never want that. You want one single unified framework that's used across all the company. Why do you want it? Well, the reasons are pretty straightforward. Reusability. Don't make people in your organization write the same in different frameworks. This is a pure waste. Lower maintenance cost. You don't need to maintain many frameworks, just one. So the cost is obviously lower. And easy porting. So assuming that you have this multiple frameworks, or some are open source, some are paid, some are homemade. How do you pick one? What do you need to take into account not to make a mistake and not to fail with your automation? So the first aspect is obvious. This is the cost. You need to find out how much will it cost you to use this framework in the future. So you need to obviously take into account the price for it if it is developed by another company, or you need to take into account how much it will cost you in an engineering time if you have a homemade solution. You need to take into account user experience of this tool. And I don't mean here whether this is pretty or not. I mean here whether it is easy to use and it will not take much time before the test team will familiarize it with it and start using it fluently. You need to understand whether this framework has all the functionality you need. This is very tricky, and this requires a lot of input from your engineers. Can I run it with this? And obviously, you need to understand if you will get a support for improving this framework if it doesn't have everything you need, or if you predict that in the future something will pop up. So you need to have a support from the developers of this solution, whether it is in-house or external, or if it is an open source, whether do you still have a support from the community? Because it makes no sense to select the framework, even super one, if you know that it will not be developed further. So I told you about all the technical stuff, if I can call it like this. But I saved I think my perspective most important part for the end. Human factor. Why did I put it here? Because if you don't care about human factor, you will definitely fail. There's no way you will succeed. Let me explain why I think so. So many companies, when starting a new way of working, an introduction of a new way of working, or if they just start saying, hey, from now on, we'll try to focus more on automation or whatever. They forget how important change management is, how important it is to explain to the people, to the engineers, to managers, to everyone, why we are making this change. What does it mean? What benefits it will bring? Why do we want to implement it? The change management is almost always underestimated, and it is very important. And there is obviously this super specific um, human aspect when it comes to starting automating more. And those comments that you see here on the right side of the screen, this is something that I've heard personally when we did similar change in my company. I am a tester, not a developer. I don't want to write scripts. This framework is totally unstable. I don't want to work with it. This is faster if I do it manually, obviously. Before I automate it, I'll do it like 3 times already, so don't bother. This framework doesn't have the functionality I need. I'm not going to use it. It makes no sense. But I have my own. It works perfectly and it's crafted for my needs. Why do you want me to use this other automation framework that you selected? If you ignore it, if you say, hey, we are doing it anyway, we don't care, it's a straight path to failure. If you don't convince the team that this is the right way to go, a team will not will to change their way of working, and they will not accept the change. They will slow down the progress at best. They might even try to proactively sabotage the change by not using the framework you selected, not automating, running the tests manually, even faking the execution. And in the end, if the frustration level goes very, very high, they might even think about leaving a company. We don't want that. So I told you what can go wrong. I discussed that you might choose to automate the wrong test cases. You might pick the incorrect automation framework or skip the unification, that you might not take into account the aspects of test equipment or test lines. And last but not least, I told you that you might forget about the human factor. So now, how to do it right? What we can do to make it work? As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, I decided to use a real-life example to show you what kind of challenges we faced and how did we dealt with them. So true story. Some background here so that you know what I'm talking about. Let's assume that we are trying to start automation for the 5G base station with a dedicated hardware, software developed in-house on it, that requires third-party equipment, user equipment, as I mentioned, mobiles, and to add some more difficult aspects on the top of it, it uses over-the-air interface that's pretty unstable. So what now? What were the challenges? The challenges within the test environment, as I mentioned, unstable and a very complicated test environment. Over-the-air interface is pretty tricky to work with. Third-party equipment never behaves as you expect it to. Sometimes, it never behaves as you expect it to. Sometimes use overheat. Sometimes they just turn off for no reason. Sometimes you use them in a way that the customer will never use it, so they can do very weird things. The challenge is regarding return of investment calculation. So expensive equipment. If you want to test base stations, you need to create a perfect infrastructure. You need to buy end user equipment in high quantities. You need to buy sometimes very expensive, a very how to say, new mobiles like iPhones. And obviously, you need to make everything stable, and you need to make it safe for the testing to use. When it comes to 5G testing, this requires, for example, a specific tunnels in which you put your test line. And the last but not least, human factor. Obviously, it's in human nature. We don't like to change. We like what we know. We like our existing way of working. So every change, everything that we want to implement requires some convincing. So how did we handle it? Unstable test environment. What can you do about it? So the first, you might consider using simulators. Those solutions are usually expensive. If you use either simulators for the end user equipment or the simulators for the core. But if you need super high stability for your tests, it might be the way to go. Simulators should behave in a predictable way and should ease up your automation. The second thing that's helped us for the unstable and the expensive test environment was introducing the dedicated test lines that were never touched. Even if those were a little bit unstable, even if we use third-party equipment, not touching them, just making sure that nobody uses them for anything else except for our automation, helped a lot, eliminating a lot of environmental issues that did bad things to our scripts. And the last but not least part that helped us with unstable test environment was no manual workaround policy. It's really easy if you spot a problem to work around it. So maybe, okay, so my UE, my mobile phone overheats. Okay, so, well, let's run this automatically, but when this UE overheats, I'll go down to the laboratory, I will turn it off, pull it off, and put the phone back again. This is not the right way to go. This is not really the automation. You lose time. You impact your return of investment. So in this case, our solution was to put a special funds that try to cool the mobile. It helped. Obviously, there might be many things that tempt you to put a workaround on your script. Don't do that. This is not the right way to go. What was the solution for our expensive equipment? You can never work fully around it because you always need to invest something. But something that might help you in such a case is first using universal solutions. So building up a test line that has everything and used it 24/7. So run most scripts that you can on it to use it fully, not to need to duplicate it. Second thing, create a test strategy using return of investment. Make sure that you don't waste your time and resources on running test cases that never find a problem. By that, you can limit number of equipment and obviously the time. Last thing that is useful in such a case is in-house solutions. For example, if the simulator that you buy from an external company is super expensive, you might think that it could be a good idea to create your own. It might take time and it is not for free, but you can tailor it to your needs. And obviously, the solutions that are on the market are crafted for many companies. So they might have the stuff that you don't need. In-house solution will be dedicated just for you. So that's something that is worth considering. And what about the human factor? As I said, for me, this is one of the most important things. So you need to think carefully what you want to do when introducing that kind of new way of working, or if you start automation. So the first thing, and this is my personal favorite, communication should go both ways. So You tell them why do you want to do it. The company should tell them why they want to do it, explaining in details what's the benefit, explaining what they want to achieve, why we are doing this, not just stating, hey, we are going there and whether you want it or not, this is the way to go. No, you should clearly explain the motives, and then you should listen to what the engineers have to say. Don't treat it as, hey, they are just complaining because they are lazy and they don't want to change. No, you need to listen carefully about their complaints, because they are usually right. If they say that the environment is unstable, it is unstable, and you need to find out the solution to this. If they tell you that, hey, mine works better, then you should take a look of this mine and see why it works better and maybe implement it somewhere else. So the suggestions given by the team should be implemented, and the team should know that you've listened and you've understood their concerns. The second aspect, and this one is for the comments, I am tester, not developer. I want to test, not to write scripts. There's always some part of a test that need to stay manual. Integration, test strategy, creation, exploratory, robustness testing, all that stuff that cannot be automated. If someone is not willing to write scripts, if someone feels better doing integration work, well, that's the right way to go. Not everyone needs to write a script. So listen to the people and make sure that they are happy with the solution and that they are happy with they are. All right, I told you more or less what I wanted to tell you. Let me sum it up. If you forgot to listen or if you don't remember anything I said, that's just all this presentation in 3 parts. First, what do you need? Plan. You need to understand the ROI. You need to understand the challenges with your test environment. You need to understand what lies there ahead. You need to plan the communication. You need to plan working with people. Then you need to have tools. You need the automation framework. You need test environment. You need third-party equipment. You need to calculate how much does it cost. And the last, you need people. You need to know that the people are on your side, that they will work with you, that they will help to develop the best solution possible, and that they are not frustrated. And that's it. Thank you for listening. And I hope some of you will post some questions. I would really like that, because every time I'm presenting on a conference like this and I get some questions from you, I learned a bit. So now's the time. And thanks for listening.
All righty. Thank you very much for that very insightful presentation. I myself am a big fan of automation, so whenever I could, I would like to automate everything. But there's a lot of background information that you really need to know what's going on. A lot of planning that you have to do to really understand this automation. So it's not that easy to automate everything and then just go to sleep. So thank you once again for that presentation. And yes, right now it is time for our Q&A session. So I hope everyone had their Discord channels open. I hope everyone was asking questions. So let's go to the questions. And why don't we start off with the first question? How can I tell if a return of investment was considered good or profitable?
Oh, that's a good one. What kind of return of investment is a good return of investment? So definitely above zero. That's the first thing that you need to check. If it's minus, then don't automate. But in fact, it's a pretty tricky question, because uh, how do you say it's, if it's like 50, sorry, if it's like 1, is it good? If it's like 0.5, it is bad. Um, as I said, straight answer, everything above 0 is good to automate. But you need to remember one important thing. Return of investment changes over time. So if you calculate it in one moment of time, it might be lower than if you calculate it in 2 years from now. So as I said, no straightforward answer. Everything above 0 is worth considering.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Uh, we could go to our maybe second question. What kind of ROI is a good ROI?
Ari, this was the same question. Probably someone asked the same thing twice.
Oh, well then, maybe we could then move on to this next question. Uh, it's almost easy to start automating, but how to develop them when your repository grows to some projects and after year two, main builder of its leaves us and you truly don't recognize where is what inside repository. So in the end, you lose your automate tests and come back to manually.
Oh, okay. This is a very specific question, but if you end up in a situation like that, that everything depends on one single person and nobody else knows what is happening in your repository, that's probably a bad thing. What I would recommend as a manager is to never have people that are irreplaceable. If you end up in a situation like this, then probably you need to do some reverse engineering to save whatever there is and start over. But my advice would be to avoid such stuff. Don't make everything that you have dependent on one person.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. And we have one more question. Who should start planning switch to automated testing, test team, or test management?
Haha, that's a good question. uh, Let me think a little bit about the answer. So in ideal world, the test team is empowered to find out, hey, this is a good idea to automate, let's do it. But in reality, it usually works like this, that we are top-down organization. So test management decides based on some research that it is a good way forward to move with automation. If the test management is good, they will work with the team on the details and they will implement it according to the best technical knowledge. So that's my answer.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. And I think we have one more question. How would you deal with situation if people don't want to change test framework only because they don't know the new one and prefer to use old one, assuming that the new framework is better?
So the first, how do you know it is better? If you know that it is better as a manager or as a technical person, you need to explain why is it better and what are the benefits. If you say to them, hey, you need to switch because it's better, then I'm not surprised that they don't want to do that. But if you say, hey, let's switch to this one because um, it has more functionality, it is cheaper, you will learn it very fast. We can easily port this from one framework to another. So my personal advice as a manager is explain, talk, and listen. They might have a good point, and if you explain to them that if you tell them, hey, your point is valid, I have a way to solve it in this new framework, then probably you will be able to convince them. Okay.
Okay, okay, thank you once again. And I think we have time for one more question, one final question. How to avoid when each team will start to develop their own automation solution? Ooh, I like this question.
Well, that's a tough one because from my experience, you cannot unless you just created a startup and you select automation framework at the very beginning. Everybody starts from a super start working on it. Usually, if you wait a little bit, as I said, engineers are engineers. They will try to make their life easier and they will start doing their own thing. So either you start very, very early, or you need to deal with unification at some point. So that's that's a perfect question, but I don't think anywhere in the world, a good solution exists.